Okay. The Topsham Planning Board for this evening. Can you please call the roll?
Don Span,
Present.
Carrie Bickford,
Present.
Ronald Bisson,
Present.
Larry Brand,
Present.
Dan Flagg,
Present.
Scott Libby,
Present.
Andrew Lindsay,
Present.
all present.
All right, thanks. And again, on behalf of the board, I want to welcome you aboard. Okay, so we have pretty full agenda. Need to go through the minutes. There are a couple of projects we will be reviewing, and both will be conditional use hearings. Item E, which is the public hearing request, which the select board has asked us to look at, will be a planning board discussion about and vote about scheduling that for February 23rd. So there will not be any public comment or input into that discussion. So why don't we start with the approval of the minutes of the December 8th meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes of December 8, 2022 as submitted.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, and one Ricky. Okay, so the first item is Cantrell Seafood LLC. Planning board will hold a public hearing to discuss the conditional use permit application for retail use at 247 Lewiston Road, tax map R05B, lot 48. Your copies.
Thank you.
You guys ready for me?
Yeah.
All right, Joe Martin, the sidelines here on behalf of Cantrell Seafood Inc. Just a little bit about the project team. Cantrell Seafood Inc. is the applicant. Sightlines was the engineer and surveyor of record for the project. We worked with Land Design Solutions for some landscape architecture assistance. And then Maine Septic Solutions assisted us with the septic design. Just a rundown of the development review so far. We met with you back in 2021, or actually for the sketch plan for this project. Now we're coming for you tonight, hopefully get a final plan approval. Earlier this week, we did submit to DEP for a stormwater permit by rule, and that should be approved here in the next few weeks. Quick rundown of the project. It's located in the CC 196 zoning district. It's about a 1.4 acre parcel. It has been previously developed. It's been years ago. It was just a residential house, and then more recently it was used as a used car dealership. And it does have one existing curb cut to 196 that will be reused for this project, and we'll be expanding that curb cut to account for the additional traffic. So the project will consist of two new buildings. One will be a building that will be used for the retail component of Cantrell Seafood. It'll also have some processing and some office space in there as well. And then there'll also be a single-story storage building in the rear of the project, just be used for just storage and not necessarily even associated with the Cantrell Seafood business. And then, as you'll see on the site plan, there's also going to be 21 parking spaces provided for the use of the customers and the employees of the Cantrell Seafood building. Utilities wise, there's no public water or sewer out there, so there's an existing well that was used by the car dealership that will be reutilized for this project. There was an existing septic system, but there was no records of it. and it was probably upwards of 40+ years old. So we went forward and designed a new septic system to account for the additional flows from the new building. This is just an aerial view of the project site. You can see 295 going from the southwest to the northeast, and then the project site is just located just to the northwest of that, right along 196. This is just a, well, let's look in here. It's just a zoomed in of that same aerial. Again, Route 196. The site here is pretty much right in the center of the aerial. You have some commercial properties to the north and the east, and actually Cantrell Seafood right now rents some space on the property to the east of this. And then there's some residential properties to the north west of this project site. So this is the site plan for the project. It has changed quite a bit since we came forward with the sketch plan. You'll see the larger building in the front is about 3,600 square feet, it's 2 stories. And that's where the retail component of the Cantrell Seafood will be. You see there's parking stalls located along the front and the side and at the rear of the building. There's also going to be a loading dock at the rear. And you'll notice just to the north of that building, there's some blocks on the opposite side of the access drive, and that's the new septic system. So it's got a pretty large footprint for the flow that's going to be directed to it. The dumpster pad for the project is located out by the loading dock, and that will be screened on all 4 sides. One, to just screen it from the road, but also to screen it from abutters and the residential uses. There's also the storage buildings located in the rear of the building. One thing to note is that the overhead doors for that are facing towards the commercial uses to the east. When we first had this designed, those were facing towards the west, towards the residential use, and that's not permitted within the zoning ordinance. So that was swapped to the opposite side. One thing to note on this plan too is along the western boundary, that abuts the residential use, there's a 50-foot buffer required. A portion of that buffer has been cleared already just from existing uses of the property. So where there is a buffer in place, we're maintaining it, and where there is areas where it's been cleared, there'll be some replantings proposed in there, and you'll see that on the landscape. This is that same site plan, just with the aerial underneath. You can just see there's a boat storage facility to the north, and you can kind of see the residential uses to the west there. This is the grading plan. Pretty straightforward. Pretty much the property from the front of the retail building drains towards 196 and drains that landscaped area between the building and 196, and then the remainder of the site drains to the northeast corner, and there's a depression there that has a culvert that discharges to an established swale that's offsite. This is the landscape plan for the project. You'll note the new trees and shrubbery proposed along the frontage of the site. That's to meet the screening requirements of the ordinance. And then again, that buffer on the western side, we are proposing some new plantings where that buffer has been cleared. And then we've also, there is some existing trees along, especially as you get to the rear of the site in that back corner. It's not very dense, so we wanted to add some additional trees in there, especially where we have that residential dwelling, to try to enhance that buffering as is. So those trees are shown on there, but it says on there to adjust in the field as necessary, where those are best suited to provide the most amount of screening from that residential use. There's also foundation plantings proposed around the buildings. And you'll note there's some parking, landscape islands in the parking lot, and those also have some plantings in them as well. This is a front view elevation of the new Cantrell Seafood retail building. Notice there's a covered front entry. And this is just a And I won't swear to these colors, but it's just kind of show you a rendering of what the kind of scale and shape of the building would be. And so with that, I can answer any questions you have. I know there's a number of waivers that we've requested as part of this as well. I can answer any questions you have.
So I guess I'll ask the board, we're gonna have waivers, we also need to do a public hearing on the conditional use. And the rest of the site plan package or whatever, which we've seen a good percentage of it. Do you want to go ahead and have them finish that? Then we can ask questions, then we can open up to the public, and then we can review both the conditional use and
Seems reasonable.
okay. Yes. Yeah, so if you would go ahead and talk about the waivers, I made a couple notes. It looks like it's some parking waivers as well as lighting waivers, is that correct?
Yes, there's some waivers to the lighting standards. Just we were fairly close to being lighting standards, but just to provide some enhanced lighting around those loading areas and adjacent to the side of the building, and we just weren't meeting the uniformity ratio that's specified in the ordinance. And then one of the waivers was for lighting along at the entrance. Underneath that front entrance, there is going to be some recessed lighting within that area, but that was not able to be modeled in our lighting software. So just want to waiver from that, but that front entrance will be well lighted.
So while you're on waivers, in particular, I guess 175(9)(G)(2) on the walkways. At the end of that section on the lighting standards, staff recommended these waiver requests be granted. Planning board has the option to add a condition of inclusion, require a peer review. Have you had a peer review looked at the waivers?
I don't think so, not yet.
Okay.
I know we just had a peer reviewer review the lighting standards on different projects. There's already a person in place in this.
I can include that as a suggestion.
Okay, so that's on the motion. Okay, good. All right, so go ahead and go to the land. Before we leave that, then, any questions from the board on the lighting waiver?
Right, and there, as I understand it, by reading this, the waiver is that they're providing more lighting than the ordinance requires, correct?
Yeah, a little bit higher.
Higher intensity.
Yeah.
Because of security reasons.
Yeah, and the loading area on the
Safety.
backside, yeah.
Then the next set of waivers is for the landscaping.
Sure. So there's a locating all the trees of 6 inches or greater. We don't feel that necessary for this project. We are trying to maintain all of the existing trees within that residential buffer area. So we're not trying to clear any of the trees located in that area. The street tree landscape design, the ordinance requires, I guess requires street trees to be planted within the public right of way. Right there on 196, I don't think that's a practical location for that. And there's no real streetscape there right now. I think having the plantings where we're showing them set back from the road, one, it provides a nice screening and buffering, and two, you're not going to deal with any issues with blocking your site distance entering or exiting the site.
And those are maple trees. I think.
Yes, yeah. Trying to think if there was another species in there, but there was maple tree. I just can't remember if there was another species. So the next waiver of the 175-10E2. I think that's referring to maintaining existing trees within the frontage. Yeah, correct. Yeah, so right now there's pretty much no trees maintained. There's no trees in the frontage area. There's one scraggly tree that's along the frontage that I'd be surprised if it's still alive. And the last one is the planting requirement for the frontage. I did talk with this with the landscape architect, and it's pretty typical of the commercial, projects we presented before is the requirements of the ordinance. If you planted for the requirements, there wouldn't be enough room for the number of trees that are required, especially allow them to grow and thrive. So we are providing, I believe, 4 trees, a number of shrubs and flowers. So I do think it's adequate. Plus the board to decide, but that's the last bit.
So go around, Carrie, do you have anything? Damon,
No, I think all the waivers seem reasonable to me.
anything else on the project? No.
So we're not just sticking with waivers. Other things. You mentioned the storage building may not be used by Cantrell's.
What I mean, it's not directly tied to the use of Cantrell seafood, meaning I think when you store some personal use stuff in there and.
Okay, it's not-
It's a general storing building, so it's not necessarily associated with the Cantrell retail business.
But it's not like going to be a storage business or.
Nope, just for use by the owner.
All right, and one of the things that we talked about last year was connectivity or potential connectivity with the I don't know what we call it, the Agway lot.
Yeah.
Urban Garden lot. It looks like you off of where the storage building is, potential for that. Is that the case?
Yep, so down at the lower end of where the kind of flattens out there down at the bottom of the storage building, we do show, it's not on this plan, it's on the site plan. But there is a easement that we provided there, a common access easement, so there is that connection. One to
The dotted lines are there? on the
Yeah.
east,
Yeah.
northeast?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got some things to dodge on that side. You have, of course, have the building, the existing building there, and then you have some wells and some utilities you got to avoid. And it made sense to tie in at the bottom there where, it's nice and flat. It would be an easy transition. If we need to, for sure.
In the lights that are the hotspots, you said are on the loading dock and the access, not the front access, but the kind of employee access to.
Yes, yeah, and there's some building mounted lights that just because of how those are situated, you get some hot spots right below the lights, but as you get further out towards the.
The shielded lights,
Yeah.
it's just a downward looking.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have.
Anything on this end? Nope, also. All right, do you have anything else for us? Otherwise, I'll open it up for conditional use.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone that has any questions, concerns, or wants to testify in regards to this Cantrell project and this request for a conditional use? Is there anybody on Zoom that? Sure.
And as you know, hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Just once again, anyone would like to make any comments or questions or share any concerns in regards to this project? Not hearing or seeing any public hearing. So I'm back to the board. Any other discussion or any other questions for the applicant? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Scott.
I mean, as far as the conditional use goes, I think, it fits in. Obviously, there's the retail right near it and other retail businesses nearby. And I think that's what the only issue was, right? Because retail's conditional use in that zone, so.
Yeah, and my reading through it, I understand that there is no traffic permit required. Right, so that would be the only other thing that we think about. So.
Yeah, I didn't see any issues with the conditional use standards.
All right, I'll make a motion. I move the Cantrell Seafood Retail Store conditional use permit is in compliance with chapter 225, section 67, conditional use standards, is approved with the recommended findings of fact identified in the staff memo from town planner Julie Erdman dated January 26, 2023. And the application materials and plans provided by the applicant and reviewed by the board.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
Do we have,
I'm not sure if it did it first.
do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you. All right, so do you want to, I guess, address the waivers first?
Sure. No one has any other comments?
Well, are there any other comments on the site plan and or the waivers? I think the only thing, I'd have to go back and
The
double
only,
check.
the only thing that, when you're doing the motion, there was the condition about having.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna add.
The peer review.
Right.
Okay.
That's condition 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll make a motion for the waivers first, and I move that the requested waivers for lighting and landscaping, 179, 175, 9F1, 175, 9G2, 175, 10A2, 175, 10C, 175, 10E2, and 175, 10E4 are approved.
Do we have a second? So we'll go with Ron on the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed, all right, unanimous, thank you. So site plan, any discussion on that, any questions, or can we go to a motion? All right.
I move the final site plan review application for Cantrell Seafood Retail Store located at 247 Lewiston Road, tax map R05, lot 48, meets the applicable standards in the site plan review ordinance, chapter 175, and the zoning ordinance, chapter 225, including the specific additional standards for the CC 196 zoning district, and is approved with staff recommended conditions 1 through 8 and findings of fact identified in the staff memo dated January 26, 2023.
We have a second. Ron again is second.
Run it down.
All right, here's all of that. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All opposed, all right, unanimous. Approved, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so. Next item on the agenda, is Compass Lane self-storage. The planning board will hold a public hearing to discuss the conditional use permit application for storage use on Compass Lane, Lewiston Road, tax map R05, lot 47-3C. And also we will be doing a final site plan application submitted by Spencer Ritchie for a self-storage development consisting of 5 buildings, totaling 16,400 square feet on Compass Lane, Lewiston Road, tax map R05, lot 47-3C. So please identify yourself and.
Hello, my name is Chris Taylor. I'm an engineer with Sebago Technics, representing Spencer on this project. As you can tell, my voice is a little hoarse, so I'll keep the presentation short and then answer the questions that you guys have. Out in front of you on the screen is the proposed layout for self-storage development on the subject property. This plan here was presented at pre-application meeting back in the fall. The board, it's stayed relatively the same building configuration and sizing of the buildings. We've added the plan sets some more specifics that are required as part of the full site plan application. specifically, getting into, there's 1,600 or 16,400 square feet of self-storage buildings, proposed. In the CC 196 zone, so very close by the past project for Cantrell Seafood. It's just down the road and kind of located back behind Lewiston Road. It's tucked back. We are applying for a site plan approval and conditional use application. And this is also being presented as a common plan development to allow multiple buildings on the lot with some reduced setbacks. We're showing common driveways, common access, some common, there's a stormwater basin in the back, which will be used by all of the buildings and kind of full development. The development will be maintained by, owned and maintained by the applicants, Richie. And that's basically the presentation I have.
So actually, that was the one paragraph I circled. When you talk about the planned commercial development or common development, and on this staff comment, it basically says the CT 196 zoning district does not allow PCDs. There should be a narrative submitted that explains how the project functions as a common development and conforms to the ordinance requirements. So can you sort of walk us through that and help us all understand that?
Yeah, there's actually a difference between a planned common development and a common plan of development. And we are kind of applying as a common plan of development, in which case there's kind of two review criteria. That the proposed shall be based on an adequate common plan of development, and the proposed project shall make adequate provisions for the use and maintenance of common and or shared spaces such as but not limited to shared walls, parking, ingress, egress, signage, and other common and shared spaces. And we did provide after we submitted the application, we provided a letter to town staff, kind of outlining that we are, this plan is a plan showing one plan for and how these buildings will be used in common with one another. The access is works with the two entryway points and then providing drive aisles to all the buildings. There's common driveways between the buildings that will be used by the whole development. Stormwater basin in the back that serves to function all of the buildings and all of the development for the buildings, and has a common stormwater drainage system.
Okay. So not to put you on the spot, but that was acceptable, because you brought this up in your comments. So this,
Correct.
that definition basically is acceptable.
The code enforcement officer felt that it was acceptable.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll ask if anyone has any questions, either from the standpoint of the conditional use or from the standpoint of the site plan. And you had a couple waivers here too. Maybe you could start with explaining those.
Yep, we did have a couple waivers on the project as well. They are in regards to lighting and landscaping. In terms of the landscaping itself, there's a waiver to not survey the existing trees on the site. We're showing the tree line. The majority of the site has been cleared and it's kind of a field. We're expanding into the tree line a little bit, but there's going to be minimal tree clearing. We didn't feel it was necessary to go out and survey locate each individual tree, but that the tree line would suffice as showing the impacts of the existing trees. We're also requesting waivers for the lighting on the site. In terms of the amount of lighting, we're kind of proposing extra lighting, and it creates hotspots directly under the fixtures for these self-storage developments. The typical lighting scheme is to mount the light fixtures to the building and have them shine directly down. so that you don't get much spray or much glare spreading out. That creates kind of a hot spot directly under the light fixture. The other thing that's difficult with these self-storage developments in terms of the lighting and not creating too much light directly under the fixture is that the building walls are only about 8 feet tall. And so the light fixture is very close to the pavement. So when that measurement gets taken at the pavement level, there's not very much distance to have that light get spread out. So it creates hot spots directly under, which kind of creates a large difference between one of the low spots on the site and the high spot or the hot spot directly into the fixture. And that also creates it exceeded the lighting that, because these are building mounted fixtures, it also exceeds the allowable lighting levels on the building facade itself. And so we're requesting a waiver for that. One thing that I would note and point out on the lighting itself is that most of the fixtures are located between two buildings or multiple buildings, so that it really creates a corridor where the light is going to be. It isn't going to spread out beyond the drive. It's very much.
Okay, you also have landscaping or?
The landscaping was about survey locating the existing trees and not what is.
All right, okay, good, Gary. Gary?
I was just curious, this is just a question off the top of my head. Do you have any kind of gate? So that nobody can drive in just off the street, especially at night?
The applicant is proposing to install gates and security cameras on the facility. It isn't shown on the site plan, but the intent is to install gates.
I was just surprised not to see them with every storage facility I've been to. You either have a code or a key or something, so.
Yeah, majority of them do, some of them don't.
I'm just curious.
I think that's one.
Yeah, a question about the design standard waiver that's listed in the memo. It's talking about the metal siding. But there's also a note here in the memo on page 10 stating that you won't be using metal on the facade of the building and front wall facing the street. Is that correct?
We are, sorry, I did skip over that waiver. There is also a waiver request for metal buildings. And the way the regulation of the ordinance is written is that it doesn't allow highly reflective materials to be used. And then it lists plastic and metal. We didn't, the building and the siding and the roofing is all proposed to be painted to cut down on that reflectivity. And so we didn't really think a waiver was particularly required, but in talks with staff, we thought we might as well go ahead and request a waiver because it is in the ordinance itself. It gives an example of metal siding has a highly reflective material. We don't think it's necessarily the case when it's painted, so that was a waiver request there. And then there's also a comment about the siding on the front face of the first building. So the side of the long horizontal building that faces Compass Lane, there's a requirement about changing the siding material on the side that faces Compass Lane. Given the robust planting plan and schedule that we're proposing directly in front of the building, we didn't think it was necessary to have a different siding material given the screening of it. It is as was pointed out in the previous application, they requested a waiver for the amount of planting. We're squeezing that planting in. We think it fits because we have a little extra space on this site, but it will be a very dense planting that will provide some significant screening to the building. And it didn't seem to make sense to do a different enhanced facade of the building that's going to be basically blocked by the landscape.
Okay, so the waiver is that the paint, basically, the metal is going to be non-reflective. The building, sorry. So on. So this is not correct with this, it's written in here. You're not doing a different siding.
There's a different section of the ordinance, it's section 225-60. 10G, which states in the additional standards for CC 196 that the front wall of the building facing the street shall be designed as the front of the building and consists primarily of masonry, wood, or glass, or a combination thereof. That or products that simulate these materials, and metal siding is not permitted on the front wall of the building. So that it's in a section of the ordinance that's not waivable.
So it can't be done. Okay,
If that's the case, we would request that we could get a reduction in the front planting requirement. Again, just because it is so dense, it doesn't, there doesn't seem to be a reason to kind of to block the whole building. If you're gonna have an enhanced facade on that front face of the building. So we would request a waiver from that section. In that case, which is section 175-10E4B. Which outlines the number, specifically the number of canopy, evergreen, and understory trees that are required in this.
So
Frontage.
what was that, 175-10?
Yes, 175-10, specifically
E4?
E4B, 4B. Yes, and here.
If we were to go forward that waiver, do you have a percentage? I mean, you gotta have some landscaping there. If you don't have the plan in front of us that has the landscaping, what are we looking at?
I guess I would propose that we reduce it by 50%. It is very tight in that front area, and we felt like we were kind of squeezing it in to begin with. I think with an enhanced facade or with a different material and reducing it by 50%, I think that would be more than adequate to provide some bottom. And there are specific.
If we were to do that, right, I would still want to peer review. To review that.
Okay, is there a way that we're gonna be able to see what that looks like from the street? I mean, I know we're just looking at it from air view, sky view.
Do you have any elevations of that?
I don't have any renderings of what the landscaping looks like for the building stuff.
Well, I'm assuming that street front and the reasons for these requirements are because it's aesthetically pleasing to look at the building, and most of them, probably have a front door or something, but this one, it's a storage unit, correct? So there's no office in it or anything like that. It's just a storage unit. So even if we change the material, it's still gonna be a big long wall, right? If it's wood, metal, cement, whatever, it's still gonna be a plain old big long wall.
And that's why, we'd rather, go with more plantings and keep the metal siding, but if it has to be what it is.
Except for we can't waiver what we can't waiver.
The other thing I would point out is that Compass Lane is a private road that's set back from 196, so the view from 196 is gonna be, buffered and set back quite a bit already.
So you don't have a lot of traffic that way.
The private road only provides access to this lot and the adjacent one, which is primarily boat storage and service.
That,
Hey, Ron.
Go ahead, Ron.
How far from 196 out to the buildings, that about 300 feet?
That's correct, about 300 feet.
How many feet?
Well, 300, about 300.
This is beyond Ponce's, is that what? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you saw, he was measuring on Agway.
Yeah.
You guys, anyone have any questions, Karen?
Forgive me if I missed something. Single story buildings
Correct.
and no office on the site.
No office, correct.
I'm back to the wall. So if we have all these buildings that you're probably gonna build and have them all match. So just because it's frontage, and there's obviously a reason for that, usually probably because of busy road and aesthetics. But if we have a place like this, it's way back there. It's actually gonna, in my eye, I'm an artist, so I look at things differently probably than most people, but. Why are we gonna do this? Just to have a different material? And I don't know if we can change that or not, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, why not have them all match and do what you were originally going to do? That just makes sense to me, that, especially with the fact that it's way back there, it's not gonna be a storefront. It's the back end of the storage facility. So why not just have it be metal like the rest of them? And why are we making them go through having a different,
Well, I'll say this a different way. We aren't making that, right? We have the zoning, and parts of the zoning we can waiver, parts we can't.
so we can't waiver this part.
So
Okay.
we can't waiver it, we don't have to like it, but we
Okay,
can't.
no,
waiver
I'm
it.
not, no, all right, so,
So, I don't know, Scott, is there a better way to explain it?
No, I mean, we can do waivers in 175 and we can 225.
all right. Do you understand my
Go ahead.
thought process here, right?
And this isn't the first time we've run into it.
Yeah.
If you're asking if I like that, no, I don't like that.
Okay, all right, that's all I want to
And it
know.
actually probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right, okay.
But that's okay.
All right. But as far as the reduction in trees, that part we can waiver. Correct? I mean,
Yeah, that's part of 175.
Yeah.
Right, it's 175 and the only issue there was we should have a peer review. Say, okay, with 50% of the trees in front of the changed wall, right, are we okay?
Can you read it? So looking at the staff memo here, there's quite a few comments.
Go ahead.
Were those presented to the applicant, Julie, and have you received any feedback on any of those?
In the
I guess it's.
staff review section there,
Yeah,
yes, all of those have been presented and they've all been addressed.
okay.
With the exception of some of the technical comments, and that's a condition of approval.
Yeah, with stormwater,
Mhm.
okay.
Anything else from the board or anything else from the applicant? Before I open up to the conditional use.
Yeah, one thing on, one of the conditions was to, have a peer review of the lighting. I just asked that we don't think it's necessary. The lighting was sent to and designed by a lighting specialist. And it's typical lighting for a self-storage development. But I'll let you decide if you think it's required.
Well, my initial thought, because none of us are lighting experts, right? So that's why we do peer reviews, and I get it, but I think we still have to. Our default has to be to go back and have the peer review, say, yes, we agree with it. So I wouldn't be inclined to change that, so.
It is something we typically do with the waivers too, because those are the,
Right,
where we're making changes in the applicant's best interest, so. I think we modified that condition to say both the landscape, lighting engineer and landscape architect to make sure that these changes are in meeting the intent. I did have one more question. the packet said that there are no residential butters, and I wondered. The new mobile home park is gonna go in that large lot to the north of this project. I can't remember how far to the east it goes. I think it may stop before, but the one map you guys had in your packet had the old lot. It didn't have the new lot because that lot got cut in half. One for the mobile home expansion and one remaining in the business park zone or something.
Yeah, if I remember correctly. We should have him answer, but I think the mobile home was. You come through where it currently exists and it flips over, and it was at the other end, not this end.
Right, it's at the
Right.
northwestern end. If you have that lot,
I do.
like, I can't remember. You know, this large lot is the lot.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the existing mobile home. Can't remember if it's a direct line or if it goes to this corner, which would potentially have residential units back there. And the only reason I bring it up is if they are back there, then yes, it would be something to look at with the lighting to minimize, the lighting in that direction.
Yeah, and then I will, with that in mind, I'll bring the site plan back up. And so this one's oriented directly north. This one's rotated slightly, so north is to the left. You can see there is quite a bit of landscape buffer along here and in this area, which is a direction where that expansion of the mobile home park you had mentioned would be.
And there's a power line through there
There's a
too.
directly, yeah, and the directed butter is a utility corridor easement.
On that back,
On that
that
line.
north
On the line, right?
Yeah, that's a power line.
and the buffer that he's showing is about 40 feet. 50%. When you look at the existing road,
This here.
the narrowest portion, so a little further
Up at the
up
corner.
right there.
Here.
Can't read the numbers. Just because if it is actually the residential area, it's supposed to be 40 feet, I think, between the commercial and residential.
Well, this building here is 20 feet wide.
Okay, so it's
So there would be at least,
40 to 60.
yeah, that's the 15-foot setback on the building there. And again, this building is kind of, the light is here, so, yeah.
Or,
Thank you.
I just pulled up the plan here, so you can see how it comes back there. It wouldn't actually, but
do you want to look at this?
So it goes straight across where the existing mobile home line is.
maybe not straight across, but
It goes a little bit at an angle,
slightly.
so it probably
So
goes to
there
where
would
that
be-
little notch is that you were pointing to.
That's all I.
Okay. Anything else? In regards to this project, the Compass Lane self-storage, I'm opening up for any public comments, concerns, questions, and please check Zoom, see if we have any questions there or comments.
I just sent a request out. They don't respond. No hands raised.
Right, back to the room. Any Anyone have any comments or questions or concerns they want to express in regards to this project? Seeing none. Board, any more questions for the applicant, or do you want to have any further discussion? Okay, Scott?
I move that the Compass Lane self-storage conditional use permit is in compliance with chapter 225, section 67, conditional use standards. And is approved with the recommended findings of fact identified in staff memo from town planner Julie Erdman dated January 26, 2023. The application materials and plans provided by the applicant were reviewed by the board.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you. For the waivers,
Well, waivers are, it's listed as the common plan development too. Do we have to do, so do that first? Okay, I move that the Compass Lane self-storage project is based upon an adequate common plan of development. And the proposed project makes adequate provision for the use and maintenance of the common or shared space.
Second.
any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed.
All right. I move that the following requested waivers for lighting, landscaping, and architectural design are approved. 175 9G, 175 9I, 175 10A2, and 175 11B7. And in addition, a reduction of 50% of the requirement of 175 10E4.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, unanimous.
Stay on a roll. Okay, I move that the final site plan review application for Compass Lane self-storage located on Compass Lane tax map R0405, lot 37, 3C, meets the applicable standards in site plan review ordinance, chapter 175, and the zoning ordinance, chapter 225, including specific additional standards for the CC 196 zoning district, and is approved with the staff recommended conditions 1 through 17 with a modification to condition 4 to read as follows. The town shall hire peer-reviewed lighting engineer and landscape architect at the applicant's expense to work with the staff and the applicant, find a suitable solution to the approved waivers and develop a lighting plan and landscape plan that meets the intent of the ordinance and addresses the needs of the applicant.
Second.
Almost done.
Oh, oops, I was wrong, my second.
And the findings of fact identified in the staff memo dated January 26, 2023.
Now,
Second.
okay, good. Any discussion on that? Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, all in favor? All opposed, approved, thank you. Okay, item E on the agenda. The planning board will vote to hold a public hearing at the request of the select board pursuant to section 225-79 of the Town of Topsham Municipal Code of Ordinances on February 23rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Forum in Mount Ararat School to take public comment on the proposal to rezone number 1, Town of Topsham tax map R2, lots 1, 1A, 2, 7, the portion which is currently zoned suburban residential, 10, 37-B, 39, 40, 41, a portion of lot 96 that lies between the River Road and a southerly extension of the eastern bound of lot 40 across lot 96 from suburban residential to limited industrial. Number 2, Town of Topsham tax map R2, lots 37 and 43 from rural commercial use the limited industrial. And number three, 2 lots 3, 3A, 3B, 4, and the portion of lot 97, which lies between lots 3 and 4, from suburban residential to industrial, all is for trade on attached map dated January 3rd, 2023 by Board of Tenants. Okay, so then we also, the board, all of you should have received a memo from, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the town of Topsham, or to the town of Topsham Planning Board from Bernstein Sure in regards to public hearings and recusals and so forth. So has everybody had a chance to read this? Right. If anyone needs to, I have it here. So I guess before we go to a vote in regards to that, does anyone feel they need to recuse themselves?
I have a question
Okay.
about this. I mean, it's great to get
This
this
isn't-
wonderful information from our lawyers. My question goes to the fact that we as a body are not voting on anything that is pertinent to the applicant. We're voting to hold a meeting, which is just part of the process. And it's a good part of the process. This is what probably should have been done last time, is what we said needed to be done. We needed, before we spent that time, the town needed buy-in to move forward. And the only thing I don't even know if we vote to hold the meeting. We just say, yeah, we'll hold the meeting. But that's not pertinent to the applicant.
I'm not sure that we do either,
Yeah.
right? But because I was surprised to see this on the agenda.
Right.
That's a different discussion. It is on our agenda.
Right. But just to the point of this, I mean, our vote is to have the meeting. And I think that's just a process. We're gonna have the meeting, it seems,
Well, I can make it simple. Does anyone oppose doing a public hearing at the, let's say, requested? And I guess if I don't see any.
Well, I'll disclose, I am in a butter. I do not think that I necessarily need to recuse myself. But I do question whether or not this is actually properly even before the planning board at this juncture. If this is a select board request, that is not how the select board couched the request. They couched it as a request by corporate construction to do this rezoning. And by couching it that way, as we all know, under the zoning ordinance, there are only 3 methods for amending the zoning ordinance. One is by select board request, which apparently this is not, according to the way the vote went. 2 is by the planning board. And we have not initiated that, or the planning department has not initiated that. Or 3 is by way of a petition signed by 5% of the registered voters. So I question whether this is actually even properly before us for holding a public hearing.
May I address that, Chair?
Please.
In the eyes of staff and the select board, this is a select board request. So the select board was approached by Perfect Construction. They said, we'd like you to consider doing this. The select board could have said, no, we want you to go get the 5% or go another route, but they chose to put it forward in this way. So we are processing this as a select board request.
So then my question then, if I may, is the select board going to be presenting on February 23rd to us? Because my understanding is the select board would need to be able to tell us why this is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, why this is in the best interest of the town as a whole, etc. As opposed to the way I read what happened with the select board was select board told Crooker, it's up to you to present this at February 23rd.
And that is correct. Actually, before that, the select board is told Perfect Construction, they want written materials submitted by February 9th, so that everyone has a chance to make informed comment when they come the 23rd. The select board would not be the ones presenting it, and that's nothing the town attorney has said that they needed to do. You are correct that in the end, before this gets put to vote, there needs to be a determination made that it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan and pursuant to. But they don't have to make that decision at this point. But certainly they're not going to vote to put it on a ballot if they don't think it's there. So this is a chance for everyone to present information, whether they think it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan or not at that public hearing. And in fact, what may end up happening is after that public hearing, the selectmen, most likely at the meeting, the beginning of March, will either decide at that point, we want to put it on a ballot, either a town meeting or a secret ballot. If it's a secret ballot, it has to have another hearing. So the other thing that could happen is the select board could decide at that early March hearing, we want to have a hearing on March 30th. And the reason why I throw that day out is because we've got the Hawaiian Theater Reserve needed to take more input on whether they should put it on the ballot. So there's probably going to be, there would be 2 public hearings and chances to comment before things ever get to the ballot. That answers your question.
No, we may still need to revisit the useful discussion, but that being said,
So the only other thing, Dawn, I saw in the attorney's letter of note that impacts us was the statement about the planning board's traditional role in reviewing the comprehensive plan and making recommendations on consistency. And I went back and found that it's actually in our bylaws as an administrative duty in the ordinance that we review the comprehensive plan and make recommendations on zoning ordinances. So I guess my question was, as part of this public hearing, is the expectation that the planning board pass a recommendation to the select board as part of the process?
yeah, and my understanding, and you can go check with them again. But based on everything at least I've seen, says that it's up to the planning board as to whether the planning board wants to take a vote and make a recommendation or not
Yeah.
recommendation. And I think that still is in accordance with the bylaws, but I don't mind checking that.
Yeah, and actually, he explicitly said that. So the town attorney has looked at that. He said that there is no requirement that the planning board weigh in on this, but he's been the one that comes to our town meeting the past few years. And he said, I've noticed in the past that traditionally the planning board has weighed in.
Traditionally, we get weighed in, right? So that may or may not happen, right? I guess. I'll wait for the public hearing to decide that, if we decide to move on with public hearing. Okay, so I should say it a different way. I would wait till the testimony of the public hearing, when it comes back to the board, to make that discussion or decision as to whether the board wants to recommend anything.
But wouldn't the expectation be that we would do that tonight? As, you know, if we're gonna move forward with this motion,
No?
the expectation
There's no
that we would
expectation on that.
review the comprehensive plan and make a recommendation after all the testimonies in?
No.
Okay.
What we're being asked to do, if I understand correctly, and correct me if I misunderstand it, is we're literally just being asked, we'd like you to conduct a public hearing.
That's accurate. And that's what the attorney said is what the request is.
So, and that has, with no other extenuating actions, right?
So it would just be taking comment, gavel when we close.
We very well may do that, exactly.
Okay, so what's the process for making that determination? I guess at that meeting.
I think we hear testimony and it comes back to the board like we typically do.
Okay,
And then we discuss with the board whether the board thinks they need to make a recommendation or not to the board of selectmen. But I think we should hear the testimony first before we determine that.
okay.
All right, so we can take a vote or we can just, I think we move on to the public hearing, but if someone thinks we need an official vote, we can do that too. All right,
But I think the board has to have an official vote to have a public hearing upon something.
so then,
We don't, I mean, we have a lot of public hearings without voting.
right,
But we have
have two today.
but we have an application.
I think that was the idea, was to actually vote to set the date for the public hearing.
well, what they say is the planning board will vote to hold a public hearing, right?
It's almost like a vote, you know what the outcome is gonna be. So in essence, the request is from the select board is that you schedule that hearing, which it probably would make sense to have it with a vote. The other reason it makes sense to address the vote for the recusal issue now is that you probably don't want to be doing this fresh in front of everyone at the public
Okay, so
hearing that
that's,
night. So it
so
probably
that's
makes sense to
fine.
go.
So I think then, and I'm fine with making a motion that we do the public hearing and take a second. Before we do that, though, we need to discuss recusal. Ron works for Crooker. I think you need to recuse yourself. That's my opinion. I would plan. You have testified against Crooker in front of this forum. I mean, so I think you need.
Not necessarily.
No, absolutely.
No.
Yes.
I remember, Don, this is a select board initiated process of 6 property owners.
We're not splitting hairs. You voted against anything Crooker wanted to do. Or I shouldn't say voted. You have testified against it, right? So I think you have to recuse yourself. And you communicated with the Board of Selectmen before they took their vote, right? Which, in my opinion, treads on ex parte communication as well, because it's not done as part of the planning board. So I think there are 3 people that should be recusing themselves, right? So I give you the options of doing that. Otherwise, then I'll ask the board without you to determine whether you think you should take a recusal.
Who's the third, Mr. Graham?
There.
When I spoke to the.
No, I
select board,
understand, but you wrote a letter to the select board in regards to this very issue, correct?
I did not write a letter to the select board.
Well, I don't, Mark, help me here.
No, Mr. Brand spoke to the select board on 2
Oh, okay,
occasions.
sorry.
and recommended it's not
I-
happen.
I spoke to the select board on December 15, December 15, no,
It's
the second select board meeting. I spoke and I specifically started my comment saying that I was not speaking to the merits one way or the other of the proposal. My comments at the time to the select board were that this, what the effect of them voting, and I brought up the 3 methods for zoning change. And that if their proposed motion passes, then they were making the zoning, they're making it their zoning amendment. And not just setting things up. And essentially, I don't sure how far I got because the chair told me that was not the issue for that evening. But that it was in fact finding that they were finding that this was in the best interest of the town. And it was in conformance with the comprehensive plan. I did not speak to the merits one way or the other with regard to the proposal. As a trained lawyer, I separate facts and apply the law to the facts. So I do not think that I have a conflict, other than that I am in a butter. No more than perhaps you don't have a conflict, because I think you have a property listed that is also in a butter to this property.
And actually it's sold, but
Sign still up as of today.
yeah,
When I
no,
drove by.
someone hasn't gone by to pick up the sign, but yes,
Okay,
you're correct. That property next to it. Anyway, sold.
okay.
And that's
So,
public
yeah.
knowledge, right? So,
But yes, I mean, obviously the board can vote as to who should be recused.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process.
right. So,
I mean, I think during, and this has been before us for a while,
right,
and there have been a lot of statements made
exactly.
at the board,
Right.
as a board, both potentially for and against.
Yeah.
And I think, as laid out in here, I mean, it's both ways. It's a predisposition for or against. And I'm not sure anyone is predisposed for or against. We've been looking at things, we've talked about the comp plan, what we think and how it fits or doesn't fit into the comp plan. I find it hard to read this memo and say, maybe, we've all said something. Do we all, do you just not have us there at the public meeting?
Well, believe me, this makes it pretty hard.
But I think most of what, I mean, I know all that I have said has been here in our meetings based on the facts in front of me. And I would say that I think that happens with most of us.
Yeah.
So I mean, I for one feel we need to move forward with the process and either put this to bed or vote on it in June at an election, not at a town meeting. If it goes to that point, if the select board decides that it's in fitting with the comp plan, which they need to do. I just have a problem with the wording and being told about recusing votes. And I think we've been pretty good about that all along. And I don't know, if we go to the vote on recusing folks,
You can vote.
I can vote how I want, so,
Exactly.
just letting that be known.
So, Ron, we know you've recused yourself. You feel you shouldn't. I assume you feel you shouldn't as well.
I feel I shouldn't because I believe this is a select board driven process.
Right.
It's a different process than Kirker being the applicant.
I can see his point, but I'm not going to see your point. He wants to, but that's all right. We'll take the vote.
But to the end, we, getting back to what I tried to get across earlier, I
Yeah.
probably didn't make the point clearly. We as a body on this issue, we're voting to have a meeting, which,
I agree.
and we're going to decide if we want to let the selectmen know our recommendations, which they may or, they may not listen, probably, they're not going to listen, they'll hear it. But it carries no legal weight. So I feel like, we need to go through this as planning board and all of us stand up there and get the tomatoes thrown at us and, listen and hear and do the process of having the public hearing to get the information to pass along to the select board.
And
Which is the only thing we're doing tonight, is just letting this go forward, is my understanding. I have
Okay.
I have no problem with that personally.
And as Scott says, there's no legal weight to holding the public hearing, and there's no need for revision.
Okay.
Again, the only reason it might be worth settling this out tonight is because you're probably gonna end up having to do it at a public hearing, and you probably don't want to take the time to go through this stuff. There's, as you notice from the attorney's thing, the other issue is the appearance of conflict of interest, or appearance of bias. And one of the examples in his memo was talking publicly against something in another forum before it ever comes before the board, which doesn't make you a bad person or something. It just, you showed you have an opinion on this already. Same thing for Dan. And so
But I did not
watching.
address the merits one way or the other. I was addressing the question, the overall legal question of the effect of what the select board was doing that night. As far as, their vote, if they were making it a select board recommendation, then their vote was saying, essentially, we believe this is in accordance with the comprehensive plan. This is a zoning amendment that should be going forward. And my point was that it does not matter if it's the request is in the Jeffscott or is off in the R3 district. That once you have that type of situation where you were voting to have a zoning amendment on any land somewhere, and it is not something that is envisioned by the comprehensive plan, then you might as well put the comprehensive plan on the ballot too, to say, why don't we just throw out the comprehensive plan? So it was the overall town-wide situation of that is what the select board was doing. They're saying, we don't really care what the comprehensive plan says. We think this is a good zoning amendment. We don't care anywhere. So we must, what difference does zoning make?
And I don't think the general public would say watching that meeting or attending though, is probably splitting those hairs. If you came across as along with a number of other people that spoke against the project.
I didn't speak against the project. I do want to clarify that. I did not speak.
That's not what the minutes of that meeting said.
Well, I don't have control over the minutes, but that I did not speak against
But if someone watched your testimony at that meeting or listened to it, you certainly didn't sound like you were in favor of the project. So it looks like you've made up your mind.
No, I'm not in
He
favor.
couldn't, he
I'm not
couldn't be in
favor.
favor of the project either, if he had spoken.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Just like.
No, the problem is that you spoke. I think that's where it gives an appearance to the public.
That's the issue. That is the issue right there. Just going down to that, the fact that you both spoke, period. I mean, I think that presents a conflict as a board member. Based on my legislative experience, if you went and did something like that, that's a conflict. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's
I
what
don't,
we
I
get.
don't think putting somebody on the board takes away their First Amendment right there. You know,
No, but you have to be careful how you say things.
And the attorney was careful about that too. He said, you can certainly come on the 23rd, you know, if it turns out that you
Oh,
shouldn't be
no,
there for bias.
no, I fully
And you
understand
can
that.
certainly address and speak at the hearing, but you'd be sitting in the audience as opposed to up on the board.
No, I fully understand that. I'm just saying that I have not had a predisposition one way or the other with regard to the proposal. And I did not express that that night at the select board meeting. It was more a matter of that this, if you send this forward, this is what it says with regard to zoning in the town and the comprehensive plan. That, that it just means we don't care what the comprehensive plan says, and we don't care what the zoning ordinance says.
Okay, we're kind of repeating ourselves now.
Yep.
So. All right, the easy way out is to kick the can to next meeting and then have the same discussion about recusal, which is what he was hoping to avoid, I think. But I think it's still gonna come up at the next meeting. But that being said, how do we want to proceed? We can proceed with a vote. Ron's recused himself. These two don't think they need to. We can vote for the remainder of the board, which is, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. About whether we think they should recuse themselves or not, or we can proceed with just taking a vote with the 6 in regards to the 23rd. But I don't know that that puts the recusal to bed if we do it that way, so I'm good either way. What you said. Well then, Scott.
I mean, I still think some of this is a moot point. I mean, the conflicts of interest, right in the 2605, the first thing it says is vote of the body is voidable. That's the reason you have conflicts of interest. We as a body are not going to take a vote that can be voidable. We're not going to. So in my opinion, I don't think there's an issue. And I also feel that I'm not sure why the selectmen's or this says the planning board will vote. Because my understanding and reading of the procedure is if the proposal is initiated by municipal officers, they shall formally request the planning board hold a public hearing as set forth below and carry out their procedural requirements of this section. All we're doing is procedural requirements. I say if we have to vote, if we want to vote, let's vote to have the meeting on the 23rd.
Okay.
I make a motion that we have the meeting on the 23rd.
All right, do we have a second?
Second,
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All right. No one's opposed, one recusal.
One recusal was
Me.
this one. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
So we will conduct a public hearing on the 23rd, and that is in the municipal, I'm sorry, it's in the forum in Mount Ararat High School at 6:30, correct? All right.
The Mount Ararat or
This says Mount Ararat High School.
I think it's the forum's in the high school.
oh, it's in the high school. Oh,
And if we need the 30th, that's more right here in the middle school, but
I haven't been in the new high school yet, so that's good.
that's near the gym.
It's right by the gym.
you said 6:30?
6:30 on the 23rd of February at Mount Ararat High in the forum. Okay, we just voted for that. We can adjourn, but I guess, can you tell us, do we have anything coming up for this next meeting? Before the first meeting? in February?
On February 9th, I believe it is, we do have a project to discuss, the 100 Park Drive.
Okay, all right. So that's the one you were asking about, right? That's, I saw some elevations and stuff, so they're gonna be sending that, you'll send that out?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I guess we already have a second, so all in favor? All opposed, right?